Dobro. History. Archive.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are opening a fascinating, really intricate set of sources. They tell a story of political assassination, but it's really not the impulsive act of a lone gunman you might picture.
Not at all, far from it.
This is the account of An Jung-gen, the Korean independence fighter, and his successful mission to assassinate Prince Ito Hirobumi. Ito was effectively the imperial Japanese resident general, the most powerful figure, really, in the Japanese colonial structure back in 1909.
Right. A hugely significant target.
And our sources, they give us this incredible granular access, almost a minute-by-minute account, it feels like, of the 7 intense days leading up to those, 7 shots fired on that cold platform in Harbin.
Yeah, the detail is remarkable.
So this dive, it really requires us to look past just the historical headline. We're analyzing a meticulously planned conspiracy. It's a story of incredible commitment, vast resources, both financial and political, and a tragic irony that still kind of defines the relationship between these nations today.
And what's essential here, I think, is how much these details elevate the whole event. It's not just political violence. It becomes this dramatic narrative of strategy and sacrifice and immense consequence.
Exactly.
So for you, the listener, our mission today is kind of threefold. We'll systematically unpack the complex, two-part strategy they designed to ensure success.
A plan A and a plan B.
Precisely. We'll meet the unforgettable characters, from the 18-year-old translator who's crucial to the resistance Godfather funding things. They formed this incredible network.
Right.
And most critically, we'll analyze the profound legal and geopolitical consequences that just rippled across Asia. These consequences, as we'll see, tragically worked against An Jung-gen's ultimate goal in many ways.
Yeah.
We're really looking for those surprising insights hidden in the specific military, legal, and, human details of this whole plot.
Okay, so let's start. And we begin far from the political spotlight of Harbin, 7 days before the event in Vladivostok, Russia. And it starts with this really brutal, visceral act of commitment that basically sealed the fate of every man involved.
Right, Vladivostok. To set the stage properly, you have to picture it. Russian Far East. It's a cold, damp port city. But for the Korean resistance movement, known collectively as the Wibyong, the Righteous Army, it was absolutely vital.
The main base, really.
It really was. It represented the last viable base of operations, kind of a staging ground just outside the immediate reach of the Japanese colonial system. So perfect for planning these cross-border operations.
And it's here, D-7, that An Jung-gen gathered his core team.
Yeah.
And they made a promise that was, a lot more than just a handshake.
Oh, yeah.
Our sources show this group of men gathered to form what they call the Danji Dongmeng, the alliance of the cut finger.
And this ritual, it's not just symbolic. It is physical. It's irreversible. We're talking about 11, maybe 12 men. The sources differ slightly on the exact number, gathering together and submitting themselves to this, frankly, brutal pledge. One by one, they take a knife and they sever the third joint of their left ring finger.
Wow. You have to just pause on the physical finality of that. It's not a scratch or a pinprick. It's a permanent amputation. A bloody, life-altering sacrifice.
Absolutely. That scar, that missing joint, it becomes their badge of honor. It's their visible, external mark of this lifelong pledge they've made.
And then they use that pain, right? They transform it into their signature.
Exactly. They take those bleeding, newly severed fingers, dip them into their pooled blood, and use it like ink to write 4 stark characters onto a white Korean flag. Korea's independence.
Just incredibly visceral.
And if you look at this through the lens of, say, psychology and strategy, this ritual does several things. First, it elevates the action immediately. This isn't crime. It's a political act of war. These are soldiers making an oath.
Right, setting the terms.
Secondly, it's a statement to future generations, obviously. But tactically, and this is where it gets really important later, that missing finger permanently marks Onjun.
Okay.
As we'll see, that specific injury becomes a critical plot point. It's actually used as a massive piece of misdirection to protect the entire resistance network after the mission is complete.
So the commitment itself becomes a tool.
Literally, this bloody commitment to the cause literally buys the network time and safety later on. It's quite strategic. ###2, assembling the key players.
So who are these men signing this contract in blood? And Jung-gen, obviously. The 30-year-old leader and expert marksman, he's the center, the one designated to take the ultimate shot. But this wasn't a one-man job.
Not at all. The operation required a specialized team, much more complex than just one man. The core operational team was tight. You have Wu Dioksun, also 30, An's closest confidant. He was actually the designated gunner for the initial attempt. Plan A. Then there's Jo Do-seon, another reliable gunner involved in the overall plan. But I would argue the most indispensable member, and certainly the one facing the highest stakes given his age, was the youngest.
Right, the 18-year-old Yu Dong-ha. Now, why would a major political conspiracy, rely so heavily on someone who's barely an adult?
Because of his very specific skill set, Yu Dong-ha had grown up in the Russian Far East. He was completely fluent in Russian.
Oh, crucial.
Absolutely crucial. Think about the operational environment. Harbin was Russian-controlled territory. Russian soldiers provided the security. Russian telegraphs handled intelligence flow. Russian police patrolled the streets. Without absolute fluency, the team was effectively blind, deaf, and mute.
So he was everything.
Everything. Translator, guide, intelligence specialist. He was the one listening in on soldier gossip, monitoring official communications. His role was vital.
It really speaks volumes about the meticulous, almost professional nature of this whole operation, that the success, or at least the coordination, hinged on an 18-year-old's ability to blend in and navigate this hostile urban environment.
Yeah, they were walking into an enemy stronghold, completely outgunned, outnumbered by both Japanese security and Russian troops. Yu Dong-ha was the essential link, allowing them to even attempt a strategy in a city they couldn't otherwise understand. #3, the Godfather and the weapon.
Okay, but sophisticated operations like this, they need sophisticated resources. Money for travel, safe houses, and, critically, the weapon.
Exactly. And this is where we introduce the man who financed a huge amount of the Korean resistance in Siberia. Choi Jae-young. They called him the Godfather.
Choi Jae-young's personal story is incredible. It gives so much context for the scope of the resistance, the resilience there. Our sources detail he was born in Nobi.
Right. The lowest social class in the Joseon dynasty, often translated as serf or slave. It was a position of extreme social rigidity. Upward mobility was practically impossible.
Yet somehow, defying all those constraints, he makes his way into Russian territory. And through sheer determination, sharp business sense, he builds a fortune.
A huge fortune. He became known as a Carnegie of the East. A successful timber and trading magnate, one of the wealthiest men in the region, and he leveraged that wealth, his social standing with the Russians, entirely for the independence cause.
Wow.
Providing massive financial backing, operational support. This wasn't, small-scale fundraising. This was industrial-scale funding for a revolution.
And he had that perfect, poignant nickname among the fighters. Pechka.
Pechka, yeah, Russian for stove. Because in that brutal, freezing Siberian environment, Choi Jae-young's home was quite literally the one warm, safe place, the stove, where resistance fighters could gather, heal, coordinate, survive the cold, both literally and politically.
Even.
Truly. And Pechka's support wasn't just shelter and funds, it was also the tools of the trade. When An Young-gun needed the means to carry out the assassination, Choi Jae-young supplied the specific high-end weapon, a Belgian-made FN M1900 semi-automatic pistol.
Okay, let's pause on this weapon, because it really highlights the professionalism here. This wasn't some standard-issue military sidearm or some, rusty antique they found.
No. The FN M1900 was cutting-edge tech for 1909, one of the first successful semi-automatic pistols on the market. Incredibly reliable, relatively compact, designed by the famous John Browning.
And crucially, it used a magazine feed.
Right, giving the shooter immediate, rapid follow-up shots. And its magazine capacity was exactly 7 rounds.
7 rounds. That number becomes key.
It absolutely does. It emphasizes this wasn't a random act of rage. It was calculated, well-funded, designed for maximum impact, mission completion, relying on a modern professional weapon that was hard to get hold of in the Far East.
So it was Pechka's sophisticated supply network that really made the execution possible.
Precisely. So by D-7, the core team is marked by blood, the strategy is being honed, the professional weapon is in hand. They board the train in Vladivostok, carrying the secrets of this two-pronged, geographically split strategy that was about to unfold.
Okay, the countdown moves fast. The team, An, Wu, and the vital Yu Dong-ha, they arrive in Harbin. 9:00 p.m. on D-4.
Yeah, and the sources really emphasize the environment. Biting cold, late October in Manchuria, a raw, just above freezing kind of cold that just adds another layer of difficulty to everything they're trying to do.
And they step off the train into this city that's bustling but foreign and heavily monitored. Harbin was a major hub for the Chinese Eastern Railway, basically controlled by the Russians.
And the Russians were now on high alert because the most consequential Japanese official in Asia, Ito Hirobumi, was about to visit. Security was ramping up.
So in this high-stakes environment, the team's survival, their success, it all rests on the shoulders of 18-year-old Yu Dongha.
Entirely. They're operating in a city where they are cultural outsiders, physically isolated. They're constantly at risk of being spotted by Japanese informants or just detained by suspicious Russian police. Yu Dongha has to navigate this complex cityscape.
Blend in, listen to the subtle shifts in Russian soldier chatter, monitor every piece of intelligence schedule changes, troop movements, all while trying not to get caught himself. It's an extraordinary burden for someone so young. The strategic planning isn't just about the shooting, it's about the infiltration, the intelligence gathering needed to get the shooter in the right place at the right time. Exactly. The success of Plan B, as we'll see, relies completely on the accuracy of the information that Yu Dongha is risking his life to get. #tag2, creating a historical record, D3. And this leads us to one of the most, I think, compelling psychological details in the sources. It's October 23rd, D-3, 72 hours before the planned execution. The pressure must be immense. So what do these men do? What's their final act of preparation, knowing they're likely sacrificing their lives? It's fascinating. They seek normalcy, but with this profound underlying intent. And Young-gun, Woo Deok-sun, and Yu Dong-ha go to a local barber shop. A barber? Yeah. They get clean shaves, fresh haircuts. It's this almost jarring moment of calm, of self-care, right in the middle of planning this violent act. They're cleaning up to meet their destiny, presenting themselves not as, scruffy conspirators, but as dignified men. Preparing themselves visually. But then they take that moment of calm and they crystallize it. They make it into a historical statement. Immediately after the barbershop, they walk to a nearby photo studio. Oh. They don't sneak in. They consciously pose for a final commemorative portrait. This photograph, it's an incredible window into their state of mind. They weren't operating in some kind of frenzy. They knew this picture might be the last visual record of them. It was a deliberate decision to memorialize their defiance, to ensure that even if they were immediately erased, their faces, their unity would survive. It becomes their testament to the future, a way of externalizing their deep sense of Han. Han, right. That complex Korean concept. Exactly. It's not just regret or sadness. It's this deep collective sorrow, this justifiable rage that comes from historical injustice, from colonial oppression. By taking that final photograph, they captured their hen in a visual format. They guaranteed that the context of their action couldn't just be dismissed as, simple banditry or some criminal impulse. They created history before they made it. Perfectly put. #3. The two-pronged strategy. Okay, so that moment of reflection ends. Yeah. October 24th, D-2. En and Woo take a long walk through Harbin Park. They're reviewing every detail. The clock is ticking down. That night, En writes his final reflections, his Song of the Righteous Man. The final preparations. The next day, the plan is locked in, and it acknowledges the extreme difficulty of hitting a major political target like Ito. That wasn't going to be easy. Not at all. The strategic thinking, which we can piece together from the later trial records, was actually brilliant because it maximized their chances. They knew Ito Hirobumi's train itinerary included 2 potential stops where he'd interact with officials. So Plan A was set for 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐄 Station. 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐄. Why there? It was a smaller stop, about 100 kilometers before the main station in Harbin. The logic was clear. Security would likely be lighter there, the crowds smaller, the chances of a clean approach much higher than at the massive official ceremony planned for the city center. Makes sense. Lower profile. Exactly. The team designated for this quiet stop was Woo Deok-sun and Jo Do-seon. Their mission, kill Ito there, away from the spotlight. If they succeeded, mission accomplished. Quietly, efficiently. But if Plan A failed? Then all the pressure shifted entirely to Plan B. And Young-gun would be waiting at the official, much more chaotic welcoming ceremony at Harbin Station. He was positioned as the backup, the main event executor. Okay, but Plan A and Plan B, they're geographically separated. There's an hour and a half of train travel between 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐄 and Harbin. How would An, waiting in Harbin, know if his comrades had failed? This is where the communication linchpin Yu Dong-ha proved his worth yet again. Yu was monitoring the incoming telegraphs. But the actual signal was simpler and much riskier.
The arrival of Ito's special train in Harbin itself served as the signal to On that the 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐄 attempt had failed.
Wow, so no message, just the target showing up meant Plan A was a bust.
Precisely. There was no radio, no secure phone line. The physical presence of the target was the confirmation signal. It really demonstrates the extreme lack of resources they had and the kind of knife-edge precision this conspiracy required.
So they had their tickets, they reviewed their positions, they had sealed their fate in blood. The night of October 25th, the plan was ready. Everything was set for the next morning.
Morning of October 26th, D-Day. Let's focus first on 𝐃𝐄𝐄 Station, that cold, windswept platform. Woo Diak-sun and Jo Da-seon are there, tense, waiting. Ito's special train pulls in, precisely on schedule, around 9:00 a.m. This is it, the quiet chance they had meticulously planned for.
They move immediately, right? Try and get to Ito's carriage.
They do. But the operation hits this completely unanticipated, frustrating obstacle. Russian soldiers. The local security, maybe just general paranoia about the VIP passenger, was unexpectedly tight, much tighter than they'd banked on for a small station.
So the soldiers just stopped them.
Yeah, the sources indicate the Russian troops at 𝐃𝐄𝐄 spotted the two Koreans. Maybe they looked suspicious, maybe it was just strict orders, but they immediately blocked their path. Woo and Jo were stopped, questioned, physically prevented from getting near the train doors.
Oh, man. So close.
Meters away. Ito was likely sitting in his car, totally oblivious, but they were utterly stuck. You can just imagine that moment, the absolute crushing frustration.
All that planning.
Cut their fingers, traveled across Siberia, got the weapon, and a few low-ranking Russian soldiers stood between them and the target. And then the train begins to pull away.
Oh, no.
Woo and Jo are left standing there, helpless. Plan A had completely failed. And now, the entire weight of the Daenjidongmyeong, the whole mission, shifts entirely to On Jung-gon, waiting in the chaos of the main station in Harbin.
Okay, back in Harbin. And hears or sees the train arriving. He knows. Plan A is out, Plan B is active. Now, logistically, this should have been the harder target, right? The official welcoming ceremony, more guards, more attention.
It should have been. But here's that profound irony of colonial security we talked about. Anne's own testimony later suggests security at Harbin was actually paradoxically looser than at the small stop.
How could that be?
Well, the Russian and Japanese officials were focused on the spectacle, managing the large expected crowd. And because they expected this massive turnout, they had allowed Japanese civilians, welcomers, waving little flags onto the platform itself to greet the great Prince Ito.
So crowd control became the focus, not necessarily assassination prevention among the civilians.
Exactly. Security was looking outwards at the crowd, not necessarily inwards at who might be in the crowd. And Yong-gun uses this flaw in the security architecture perfectly. He's dressed in a dignified black suit, looks the part, and he just blends seamlessly into that Japanese welcoming civilian crowd.
Finds his spot.
He finds his strategic position. He moves behind the long, formal line of Russian honor guards. They're standing rigidly at attention, lined up to salute Ito. He's got 7 rounds loaded in the FN M1900. His heart must have been absolutely pounding.
The moment arrives.
Yeah.
9:30 a.m. The train screeches to a halt. The band starts playing.
And Ito Hirobumi, 68 years old, steps out onto the platform. He's accompanied by the Russian finance minister, Vladimir Kokovtsov, a key diplomatic figure. And is watching as Ito begins the formal inspection of the Russian honor guard, walking right past the row where Anne is concealed.
The tension, unbearable.
Must have been. Ito finishes the inspection, he pivots away from the military line and starts walking toward the civilian crowd to greet the Japanese welcomers, right where Anne has melted into the background.
Directly towards him.
Directly towards him. This is the moment. N steps out from behind the Russian soldiers. He's just 4 or 5 meters away. A perfect, short-range shot for an expert marksman like him. #3. The 7-round barrage.
He raises the pistol. That Belgian-made FNM 1900, the professional's weapon, supplied by Pechka. And he fires the first 3 shots. Bang, bang, bang.
Ito is hit in the abdomen. He instantly collapses onto the platform. Chaos erupts.
But Anne doesn't stop there.
No. And Jong-gyun, the marksman, he wasn't leaving anything to chance. He keeps firing. The remaining 4 shots, he empties the entire 7-round magazine.
All 7 rounds.
And our sources detail the targeting. This wasn't random spraying into the crowd. It was a calculated follow-up designed to maximize the mission's political impact.
So who are the other targets?
Those remaining 4 rounds deliberately targeted 3 other specific high-ranking Japanese officials who were part of Ito's entourage right there on the platform. Kawakami Toshihiko, the consul general, Morita Jiru, the imperial household secretary, and Tanaka Sitaru, a railway executive.
Wow, so he made sure the immediate colonial leadership present was also hit.
Precisely. Making the act clearly a military strike against the colonial administration itself, not just a personal vendetta against Ito. It was broader.
The platform must have been pandemonium. Screams, guards rushing.
Absolute chaos. But Anyamgin stands his ground. He doesn't try to run. He pulls out a Korean flag, the Taeguki, and critically, he shouts. But not in Korean, not in Japanese.
It shouts in Russian, right?
Exactly. At the absolute top of his lungs, in fluent Russian. Korea! Hurrah!
Why Russian?
The ultimate strategic announcement for the international audience present. He ensured the Russian guards, the Russian officials like Kokoptov, and crucially, the international press reporters who were there covering the diplomatic meeting, they all knew the motive immediately.
Instantly framed it.
Instantly. This was an act of war for Korean independence designed specifically to draw global attention, not a common crime. And right after shouting, he's arrested on the spot by the Russian security detail. Mission accomplished, message delivered.
Okay, so the shooting is done and is captured by the Russians. And this is where the story takes a sharp turn into international law and, well, geopolitical betrayal.
Absolutely. You've got An Jung-jeon, a Korean national, arrested by Russian authorities on territory controlled by the Russian railway and garrison in Harbin. By all existing international law at the time, he should have been tried by a Russian court, or perhaps ideally an international one, especially given his claim later of being a soldier.
Right. If the Russians had kept him, this assassination becomes a massive international incident. It forces a global discussion about Japan's actions in Korea, Korea's status.
Exactly what Japan wanted to avoid. They moved with astonishing speed to shut that possibility down completely. That same night, October 26th, barely hours after the shooting, the Russian authorities committed this calculated act of betrayal.
They just handed him over.
At 10 p.m., they handed An Jung-jeon and all the physical evidence, the FN M1900 pistol, the flag, any remaining ammunition directly over to the Japanese consulate in Harbin.
Wow. Just like that, Japan completely subverted international rules to get their hands on him.
They did. Why the urgency? And why did Russia comply? Well, Japan was terrified that any kind of international trial would shine a global spotlight on their colonial methods. It could derail their immediate final goal, the total annexation of Korea.
So they needed to control the narrative.
Completely. They needed to treat An not as a political revolutionary, a soldier acting for his country, but simply as a criminal, a murderer. Russia, meanwhile, was likely looking to preserve its own strategic interests in Manchuria, avoiding conflict with the rapidly expanding Japanese empire. So they acquiesced. They sacrificed legal precedent for political expediency.
And by moving the trial to a Japanese-controlled jurisdiction, Japan could essentially erase the political motive, and had so clearly announced by shouting, "Korea, hurrah!" in Russian.
Exactly. They could frame the entire narrative on their own terms, treating his act as a private murder, thus clearing the path politically for the annexation they desperately wanted. #2. The first interrogation and the rabbit lie.
So, the day after the shooting, N is in Japanese custody. And we get this incredible human detail from a source that only came to light more recently, the memoir, The Big Star Set, written by the Japanese diplomat Ono Mori. He conducted the very first interrogation.
Right. Ono finds An Jung-jeon in custody at the Japanese consulate's temporary prison. And despite the gravity, the sheer intensity of the situation, the interaction reveals a sort of core level of formality, maybe even grudging respect.
Oh, so?
Well, Ono offers An a cigarette, a small human gesture in the middle of all this, and N replies politely, "Sankyu," the Japanese inflected way of saying thank you at the time.
Okay. But then Ono gets to the crucial question, the motive.
N's reply is succinct, powerful, entirely political, because Ito is a traitor who ruined Korea. Simple as that. But then Ono observes the key physical detail.
The finger.
The severed third joint of the left ring finger. Ono's trained to look for evidence of conspiracy, for proof of something like that blood oath. He asks directly, what happened to your finger?
And N, this devout Catholic who just risked everything for the truth of his cause.
Yeah.
He lies.
He tells a conscious, strategic, absolutely crucial lie. He looks Ono in the eye and concocts this plausible, protective cover story. I was originally a mountain hunter. I accidentally cut my finger when I was cooking a rabbit.
A rabbit?
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds almost absurdly simple.
It does. But Ono's memoir itself confirms the reason and gave that answer. He gave a false answer to protect his comrades. This is the ultimate moment of personal, tactical sacrifice.
Explain that. How did the rabbit lie protect them?
Think about it. If An had admitted to the blood oath, the Danji Dongming, the Japanese would have had undeniable proof of a massive organized conspiracy.
Right, connecting him to others immediately.
Immediately, it would have launched a huge manhunt. They would have rounded up Wu Zhou, the young translator Yu Dongha, and maybe most disastrously for the movement, the entire financial network, the Godfather, 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐄. By claiming the injury was just a solitary hunting accident,
He took all the blame.
he took all the culpability onto himself. He instantly built this impenetrable wall of denial around the entire resistance network. It allowed his comrades to survive the initial, inevitable crackdown.
But wasn't he sacrificing the integrity, the public statement of the Danji Dongming? I mean, they cut their fingers to show unity and dedication. By lying about it, didn't he diminish that collective effort?
That's the critical tension, isn't it? He risked his own reputation, risked being seen as just some clumsy hunter rather than a dedicated soldier, precisely to save the structure, the people necessary to continue the fight.
So the movement over the symbol in that moment.
Exactly. He prioritized the longevity of the resistance movement over his personal honor or even the immediate symbolic power of the oath in that specific interrogation. It was a strategic lie that bought precious time and safety for everyone else involved. ###3, challenging the illegitimate court.
Okay, so after that initial interrogation, the trial is moved, illegally, as we've established, to a Japanese-controlled prison in Lushan, what is also known as Port Arthur.
Right. And we have to keep emphasizing, Japan had zero legal right under international law to conduct this trial. Yet they proceeded anyway, basically subverting every international norm through sheer colonial power and Russian compliance.
But An Jung-geun refused to just play along with the Japanese narrative that this was a simple criminal trial.
Not at all. He didn't beg for mercy. He didn't plead diminished capacity. Instead, he used the court itself as his final platform. He stood up and fundamentally challenged the very authority of the Japanese Empire to even judge him.
How did he do that?
He demanded prisoner of war status, he addressed the court directly, and the records confirm this powerful declaration. He said something like, "I am in the court of Japan as a prisoner of war. I did not act as a private citizen, but rather as a lieutenant general of the Korean Resistance Army."
Wow. So he was completely rejecting the idea of a criminal trial.
Fundamentally, he was forcing the issue, framing his act explicitly as an act of war between two nations, the Korean Resistance and the Japanese Empire.
And then he laid out his case against Ito, the 15 reasons.
Exactly. He delivered his formal indictment of Ito Hirobumi, presenting his famous 15 reasons why Ito should be killed. And these weren't just vague complaints, they were specific, historical charges, making his assassination deeply political, not personal.
What were some of those charges?
Well, he listed specific acts he saw as treason against the Korean nation. Things like orchestrating the assassination of Korea's Empress Myeongsang back in 1895, violating numerous international treaties regarding Korea's sovereignty, forcibly dethroning Emperor Gojong in 1907, disarming the entire Korean military, which essentially eliminated the nation's ability to defend itself.
He was building a legal case against Ito, in effect.
In effect, yes. And the final charge, the one with the broadest implication, breaking the peace of Asia.
Breaking the peace of Asia. What did he mean by that?
He positioned Ito not just as an enemy of Korea, but as a regional destabilizer. He argued that by pursuing aggressive imperialism, Ito and Japan were creating the conditions for wider conflict across the whole region. So An was using this illegitimate colonial court not really to defend himself, but to put the entire Japanese policy of expansion on trial before the world, even if the world wasn't truly listening at that moment.
Okay, this is where the story gets incredibly complex and, frankly, tragic. We pivot from An Jung-geun's clear heroism and sacrifice to the completely unforeseen consequences of his success.
Right. Let's rewind for a second back to the Harbin platform. Ito Hirobumi is bleeding out. He's told that it was a Korean who shot him. And his final reported words upon hearing this context were, "Baka na yatsuja."
Which means,
He is a fool. Or perhaps, what a fool.
why would Ito call An a fool and had just succeeded in his mission?
Because the man An Jung-geun had just executed, Ito Hirobumi, was paradoxically the primary political obstacle within the Japanese government against the immediate full annexation of Korea.
Wait, really? Ito was against annexation?
Against immediate annexation, yes. We need to be absolutely clear. Ito was still a dedicated imperialist. He was no friend to Korea's independence. But his approach was different. He was a gradualist.
Like gradualist.
Yes. His preferred model was the protectorate. Maintain heavy Japanese control, absolutely, but keep a Korean facade, the monarchy, some level of administration intact. His strategy was for slow, total absorption over time. He actually believed that immediate, brutal annexation would invite too much international backlash and destabilize the region too quickly.
Okay, so who did want immediate annexation?
The hardliners within the Japanese military and government. Figures like General Terauchi Masatake, who was the war minister, they wanted immediate, complete, total control, the full absorption of Korea as just another Japanese province. They felt Ito's protectorate model was too weak, too slow.
So by killing Ito.
By removing Ito, On Jung-geun, in this one terrible, unforeseen geopolitical move, eliminated the only powerful voice in Tokyo arguing for any kind of restraint, however self-serving that restraint was.
Wow.
The assassination handed the hardliners the perfect justification they needed. They could point to this terrorist act as absolute proof that Koreans couldn't govern themselves, that Japan's protectorate wasn't enough, and that only total, direct Japanese control could bring order and stability.
So the consequence is this crushing historical irony. Anne's deed, which was meant to halt the colonial advance, to preserve some form of Korean sovereignty.
It actually accelerated its complete demise. Korea was formally annexed by Japan just months later in August 1910. The path was cleared, largely because Ito was gone. It's a bitter, bitter truth. The ultimate sacrifice hastened the very fate it was designed to prevent. ###22, the mother's final message and martyrdom.
Despite that rapid, tragic acceleration of annexation right after the assassination, An Jung-geun's own commitment, his resolve, remained absolutely unshaken. He's sentenced to death by hanging on February 14th, 1910, Valentine's Day.
Yeah, the timing is stark. And while he's awaiting his execution in a cell in Lushan prison, he receives this final, truly iconic message from his mother, Jo Maria.
Ah yes, this letter is incredibly famous.
It is. Delivered by his two brothers, it's one of the most famous and, frankly, chilling documents in modern Korean history. It really represents the absolute, unwavering commitment of the resistance movement, personified by a mother's command to her son.
What did she say?
She essentially dictated the terms of his death. She told her son, and these words have just echoed for over a century, "Your death is for the sake of your country, and don't ask for your life in a cowardly manner. If you appeal, you are begging Japan for your life."
Wow. That is the ultimate command for martyrdom. Die with dignity, don't show weakness, prioritize the symbolic power of the sacrifice over your own life.
Precisely. And An Jung-geun followed her command exactly. He did not appeal the death sentence. He accepted his fate as decreed by the illegitimate court, but on his own terms, as dictated by his mother and his cause.
Did he have any final requests?
He did make two final requests. The first was for a set of white silk Korean clothes, traditional mourning clothes, but also clothes representing his national identity to wear when he was hanged. He wanted to die wrapped literally in his nation. That request was granted.
And the second?
His second request was for a bit more time, just a few more months to live. Not to see family, not to plead further, but specifically to finish writing a crucial political essay he had been working on in prison.
And that request?
That political request was denied by the Japanese authorities. They would allow him his clothes, but not more time to articulate his political vision. ###33, the visionary and the unfinished essay.
That unfinished essay, it was titled On Peace in East Asia. Right.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely critical to understanding An Jung-geun's wider political vision.
Yeah.
It reveals him as far more than just a nationalist revolutionary or an assassin.
Absolutely. Our sources confirm he was a profound and sophisticated political visionary for his time. The essay wasn't just, a plea for Korean independence and isolation. It was a concrete proposal for achieving regional stability and cooperation.
What did he propose?
He argued for multilateral cooperation between the very nations caught in conflict. He proposed that Korea, China, and Japan should actively collaborate to create a secure, prosperous East Asia.
And were these just vague ideas or specific proposals?
Shockingly specific and modern for 1909, he argued for creating a joint military command between the three countries, for issuing joint banknotes to facilitate regional trade and economic integration.
A common currency. Wow.
Yeah. And most tellingly, given where he was writing it, he argued that Lushan Port Arthur, the very port city where he was being imprisoned and tried by the Japanese, should be returned to Chinese sovereignty. But not just returned. It should be established as a common-use naval port for all three nations, Korea, China, and Japan.
A shared strategic port. That's incredibly forward-thinking.
Think about the geopolitical scale of that vision in 1909. a shared military, a common currency, a joint strategic port for three historically adversarial powers. As many historians point out, Onyeongin was essentially conceptualizing a model for Pan-Asian cooperation, kind of an Asian version of the European Union.
Decades before its time.
Decades. Nearly 10 years before the League of Nations was even proposed after World War I, and decades before modern concepts of regional economic unions really took hold globally. His mind wasn't just on resistance, it was focused on a future of regional peace through structured cooperation. It demonstrates that the assassination, in his view, was intended as a kind of shock therapy, a radical act to end Japanese expansionism and hopefully force a move towards a more multilateral, peaceful solution for the region. #4, the afterlife of the shadows and the lost remains.
Yeongjin was executed on March 26, 1910. He was 30 years old, hanged as a common criminal by the Japanese authorities, despite his powerful claim of prisoner of war status. But his sacrifice, particularly the rabbit lie, it did have a tangible effect on those he protected, didn't it?
It absolutely did. The immediate team survived that initial crackdown, largely thanks to his strategic lie during the interrogation. Woo Deok-sun, the gunner from Plan A at 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐄, he served 3 years in prison and actually lived until 1950.
Wow, a long life after that.
Relatively, yes. Jo Do-san, the other gunner at 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐄, served about a year and a half. And Yu Dong-ha, the indispensable 18-year-old translator, also served a year and a half. He was released, incredibly, and actually continued working in the independence resistance. He was eventually killed by Japanese troops years later, but he survived that initial purge thanks to On's sacrifice.
He bought them time. And what about the Godfather, Choi Jae-young, Pechka?
The Japanese never forgot him or the threat he posed. The rabbit lie protected him initially, but 10 years later, in 1920, during another crackdown, they finally arrested him. They understood his importance, his financial power. They executed him by firing squad without a trial. They made sure his immense resources could no longer fuel the resistance. So the lie bought his comrades, including Pechka, a crucial decade to continue the movement.
But the story ends, or perhaps continues, with this enduring, painful mystery.
It does. And Yeongjin's final will requested that his body be buried temporarily near Harbin Park, where he'd walked and planned. And then, crucially, he asked to be reburied in his homeland, Korea, after the country regained its sovereignty. A final journey home for a soldier.
A very simple, profound request.
But Japan refused to honor it. They buried him in a secret, unmarked grave somewhere near the Lushan prison compound. The location was kept absolutely secret by the colonial authorities. They deliberately ensured his resting place couldn't become a shrine, a rallying point for the ongoing independence movement.
And even after Korea regained sovereignty in 1945.
Even then, despite decades of extensive searches, joint excavations involving Korean, Chinese, and sometimes Russian authorities, and Yeongjin's physical remains have never been definitively found.
Never found.
Never found. The man who sacrificed his life, his personal dignity with the rabbit lie, all to be remembered as a soldier fighting for his country's future. He still has no grave. His country cannot bring him home. #outro.
So this deep dive, it really reveals the extreme lengths Onyeongin went to. The blood oath, the meticulous planning, the choice of that specific high-end weapon, the calculated protective lie about the rabbit, the defiant demand for POW status in an illegitimate court, and that incredibly sophisticated political vision in his final unfinished essay. It was all designed, wasn't it, to elevate his act from just murder to a soldier's definitive sacrifice for a broader Pan-Asian peace.
Absolutely. It was a statement made through action, through lies, through legal defiance, and through political thought. And that profound sacrifice, it leaves us with these two lingering mysteries, these sort of hauntings, still unresolved over a century later.
What are they?
Well, first, there's the lost film. Our sources confirm the existence somewhere of a moving picture taken during the trial, actual footage. It's believed to be buried deep in a Japanese government archive, never seen by the public.
Wow, footage of the trial exists.
Apparently so. And that footage, if it were ever found and released, would be this definitive visual record of his defiance, his arguments, his presence in that courtroom, a piece of history locked away.
And the second mystery.
The second, of course, is the lost body. The just heartbreaking fact that the man who sacrificed absolutely everything for the sake of his nation, who died believing he would eventually return home, still has no permanent physical presence on the soil he died fighting for. His body remains, in a way, a political prisoner, locked away in an unmarked, unknown place.
So his most permanent physical record, then, isn't his remains or even that lost film of his trial. It's that handprint, The one he pressed in blank ink before his execution, often reproduced. A permanent contract, defined forever by that one missing defiant finger.
Exactly. A promise sealed in blood, a contract, a promise that, from his perspective, he absolutely kept.